Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Two Old Sexperts. Today we're talking about internet safety. I am one of your hosts, Sean McGill, joined with my dear friend and mentor, Sharon Potter.
When I think about the internet and the people that we support, I mean, it is an enormous problem. And again, I think a lot of it comes down to education and how we help people understand what it's all about. But there are, in fact, I was going to contact someone in the Department of Corrections, and I will to get the statistics on this. How many people on the spectrum are in prison for child pornography, stalking? I mean, all of those things that are connected to the internet. They just get on there, and as we know, people with autism, with or without disabilities, have difficulty with social skills and I mean, I just always find it interesting that they're so concrete, and you ask a question and you get a concrete answer, but it's everything that surrounds that we might understand, those of us that aren't on the spectrum, that we might see it from different angles, and they often don't. They see it from one angle, and they're isolated, and so they go to these sites, and they can be taken advantage of, and they can get arrested, which they are.
Yeah, we've talked about it too. The overwhelming feeling of loneliness for human beings in general. It can really be a strong driving force behind them trying to reach out and
Yes.
find people on the internet. And so that lends to a whole nother set of problems too, because people have just made their professional careers, if you will, take advantage of people to try to bamboozle, especially vulnerable people,
Yep.
disabled, the elderly. I mean, this is a job for people, and they're succeeding.
Yeah. Well, they are, and it's so complicated. I mean, I know you don't tease me, but there's an age difference and a knowledge difference about technology. I mean, you grew up in technology, and for me, it's just like, oh my God, I don't even want to think about that. But it's true, and as people get older, or people who with on the spectrum, I don't mean to keep pointing to them, but that's the reality. It's complicated, so they narrow it down, and they don't see on the periphery. They don't see the impact of what they're doing or what's happening to them. And I think I've said this before, but I worked with two gentlemen that were arrested. They were in jail, and we managed to get them out, but it was terribly traumatic. The police burst into their house and took their computers, and they were both arrested for child pornography. But in talking to them, they repeated over and over, I would never hurt a child. I love kids. I would never touch a child. I was just watching. And they had no idea that how the watching hurt a child. Well, the more people that watch, the more films you have to make, the more kids you have to recruit, and they get hurt. They're children. They get hurt if they're involved in a sexual act. And so you're contributing to that. And they were appalled. They just had absolutely no idea because nobody told them.
We're uncomfortable talking about things like pornography too. So we have to open that door because there are people who do enjoy watching pornography. So we have to help them know where can you look at it, what sites are safe. And
Yes.
I even pull up the categories for people, and I we talk about which categories might be okay for you to watch, meaning they're not going to depict minors, even though the actors and actresses are adults. They're depicting minors sometimes, or they're talking about,
Yeah.
school age girl or what have you. But other things, like there can be pornography categories that are depicting rape or violence, or I mean, those are the things, and I have open conversations with people about that. Pornography is not to teach you about sex. Pornography is used as a tool for you to be aroused and take care of yourself if that's what you need to do. But I
Exactly.
really need people to understand this is not what happens in a sexual relationship.
Like you're in a hotel, you walk down the hall, and there's a door to a room slightly open, and there's a couple having sex, and you go in and join them. Like, I mean, that's so outrageous. It's just
The
so
maid comes in with her hot towels and you get a blowjob. It's not going to happen that way.
exactly. Oh my God. Yeah. And the other thing that is interesting to me that I really didn't know is it called anime, or the character cartoon kinds of,
Yes.
there's a whole sites, many sites that are pornographic with these
Yes.
little characters. I had no idea.
Parents are very naive to these sort of things too. And I'm guilty of it. We let our kids just sort of be on electronics too, really not taking into consideration what they can be exposed to. So, kids love things like YouTube. So they'll search things like My Little Pony on YouTube. And if you don't have very specific filters on YouTube, you can get even pornographic images and videos of something as innocent as My Little Pony or Care Bears. So from a very early age, I mean, 3, 4, 5, there's risk for young children to be exposed to very sexual things.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
not okay.
No, and then on top of that, people can't talk about it. I mean, if the child says or does something that is sexual at a very young age, often the parents, and well, maybe I am making a judgment. I don't mean it that way because we're both parents, but instead of a parent sitting down and explaining that, they might say, "Don't you ever say that," or "That's nasty," or whatever. And then the child shuts down and doesn't tell the parent anymore, or won't say anything. But that doesn't mean they're going to stop whatever they're watching. So I mean, I just, again, this we're all in this together thing is that it's so true. Families and staff in agencies and therapists and all of us, we are all in this together, and we've got to be able to communicate and help people to understand what they're dealing with, no matter how uncomfortable we are.
So one of the big things that I try to work with people on is just, if you feel like the person that you're supporting, your family member, whoever, cannot maintain safety with things like cell phones and the internet, then we need to have real conversations with them about putting some parameters in place to amplify some of these concerns too. So if they're going to get into pornographic things that could lead to bigger problems like potential for child pornography, we need to look at what controls can be put into place. And I think in our service system, we get so caught up in, oh my God, we can't restrict people. Where if there's clear evidence to show a person cannot control the urge, or they're putting themselves in predicaments that could lend them to sitting in jail for a long period of time, we have due diligence to put those mechanisms in place.
And it's, I think, for some people in a group home or whatever, it's so easy to say, oh, just go to your room and watch TV for a little bit. And but what are you watching? Not that you have to be hovering over everybody every minute, of course not. But it's just important to have discussions about that sort of thing. If we don't, people are going to jail. They're going to continue, and more will go. And yeah, I don't know. I really worry about it, and the more I read about it, I mean, I've seen some people, not to diagnose anybody, but I don't know if it was Zuckerberg or one of the multi-billionaire people who, for me, looked clearly like he had Asperger's, and I have friends who have Asperger's. But someone asked, there was a hearing, and someone asked him a question, and the question was so simple that I think in his head he thought, well, how can he ask such a ridiculous question? And he said, I don't understand the question. And people said he was so arrogant. Well, he wasn't. He didn't understand the question because it was such a simple, like, maybe it was something like, well, what is the internet? Something like that someone asked him. And we've just got to understand, sort of get into their world and try to help them see things in a fuller, deeper way. And the other thing is that people often, if they're uncomfortable having conversations about relationships and romance and sex with people their own age, adults, they may just hatch it down a little bit to somebody younger they can relate to them more. And it doesn't mean that they're out there, trying to be a child, rapist or something, but they end up often in those situations. Not that that they rape someone, but that gets categorized as that because the person is young.
There are some tricks that we can teach people too. Social media is a big thing. So teaching people about privacy on your accounts. How do you set a private account so that people can't see everything unless they're really a friend? Talking through what does it mean to be a friend? So I create some rules for people. There was a book written many years ago. Temple Grandin had partnered with Sean Barone and wrote the unwritten social rules. I think we need to have some unwritten internet rules to serve as a guideline for people.
Yeah.
Unless you know of the person, you know them in some capacity, whether they're just an acquaintance, they don't have to be a real friend. You should know them before you accept them or add them as a friend.
Yeah, there's a thing that I use, and we've talked a little bit about it, but when you said, what is a friend? What is a friend? Is it someone that you talk to on the phone or that you have lunch with or that you go to a movie with? And then what do you do with them? Do you hold their hand? Do you touch them? Do you allow them to touch you? And, like, do you know when their birthday is? Like there's all different levels of things, not someone that smiles at you and that's all of a sudden they're your friend. Then cyberbullying, it's just astounding to me how many young people commit suicide. And not that they're on a spectrum, I have no idea who they are, but because of cyberbullying, well, of course, it's personal because someone's saying something about them, but that they believe it because another human being said it to them, and now it's all out in this vast cloud stuff, and other people are seeing it and they'll believe it, and they kill themselves. I mean, it's just, and that's, with or without disabilities, we're certainly seeing much too much of that for sure.
Has the internet killed our ability to be social?
Oh, I think it has. I really do. Yeah.
Created more problems in terms of the loneliness and the depression and the anxiety also.
Yeah, I think it's a blessing and a curse. I really do, because we have access to so much knowledge, and we can communicate. I mean, I've got, 6 kids, 4 in California, 1 in Minnesota, and grandkids all over the world at this point. And I can see them on my phone. I can talk to them, and that's just awesome. It's astounding. But the flip side of that is, I mean, you and I have both been in situations where I don't know, you're in a restaurant and you look around the restaurant and there are people dining together, but they're on their phones, and or just standing outside on a corner. You can hardly everybody has is on their phone, and it just takes so much away from relationships and caring about each other. You could be on your phone and step over somebody that's laying on the street and hardly even notice them. That's not okay.
Teaching our kids, disabled and non-disabled.
Exactly.
And again, I think and maybe this is me being a little old school, we do need to have rules. I had in my house, if we're eating together, whether that's at home or a restaurant, you're not to look at your phone.
Yeah.
There,
Yeah.
there's a no phone zone right now. If we were doing very specific activities together, this is a no phone zone right now. And that meant all of us.
Yeah.
At one time I even had a basket on the table and you'd have to throw your phone
Put
in the
your phone in.
basket because we have to teach people how to be social. You can't make friends, you can't be good at a job, you can't be good in relationships of any kind if you don't know how to communicate and socialize.
Yeah. And I think my kids have done that with my grandkids. Of course, when my kids were little, we didn't have cell phones. So, but it is true. You can't sit at a dining room table with your family and have somebody on the phone. I mean, if somebody's on call and a doctor or whatever, then your phone beeps and you respond to it. But that's not what we're talking about. It's an addiction. I mean, it really. I find myself, I'll be sitting having a cup of tea in the evening, maybe watching the evening news, and I reach over for my phone just to, sometimes I'm checking on the weather in California, or what's happening if I've heard from the kids. But I don't even think about it. I'm sitting there drinking tea, and all of a sudden my phone's in my hand. But for kids that never stop, what does that say for their ability to function in the world? I mean, we can be at meetings, as we often are. We can be at meetings doing things that are really important and never be physically together. And there's something about the physical togetherness that's really important. And Zoom, I think, has helped with that rather than just the texting stuff. But yeah, I mean, I do think it's a blessing and a curse. I really do. For the people we support, I mean, it's just, we can process it. And I don't mean they can't, but it may be more difficult for them because of their situation and their ability to do deductive sort of thinking. And they get into trouble and they're alone and they're hurt and they're lonely. And loneliness, what are they doing? What are the people that we care about doing? What do they, especially in the past 2.5 years in the pandemic, they were really isolated. It was a tough few years for everybody. But for someone who's maybe away from their family and living in a group home, and they couldn't go to their day program anymore, and they couldn't have their friend come over anymore, that's got to have taken its toll. Absolutely. People died, the pandemic. They lost friends more than the general population for sure.
Those of us living who have experienced that life will never be the same. But we have to start to rebound on some level too. And we have to get ourselves out there in order to make real connections with people. And I'm not saying you can't do it over the internet. I'm saying it's incredibly challenging. And there are a lot of sort of landmines throughout the internet. So even working with people, and my own parents have been taken advantage of through different situations because they didn't know how to look at email addresses, where you can click on the email and just look at the end part of the email, and if it has a bunch of letters, it's
Yeah.
someone trying to spam you. But they'll say your Amazon account is inactive because your payment isn't. And if
Yeah.
you click on that email, you can see and you can tell for sure whether it's a spam or not. But most people don't know to do that,
Yeah.
and they fall for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know about the little thing at the bottom, but if I get something like from it, I've gotten them all the time. I even got something from the bank saying, danger, danger. And, where I live, I go to this local bank and, I know everybody knows everybody. The woman hands candy out through the drive-through window. But I just called and they said, nope, you're fine, but I mean, some people just dive right into that and say, "Oh, help me here." So it's a real problem for sure.
How to examine pictures and how to do a reverse lookup on Google to see if, let's say, a woman's profile, she looks really good. I mean, too good to be true. And all of a sudden she's super likes you on a dating site. Well, there's a way to look up that image to see if it's just a Google image that someone has used,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
people are making this their job too, or they're pretending to be someone. They're going after people in terms of you could potentially date me. They're communicating with them. And I tell them all the time, unless you see that person, and it doesn't have to be in person, but you do a video chat,
yep,
in my mind, that person isn't real.
exactly. Yeah. And it's so clear to me because as an older woman, as a senior, I often get a friend request from someone, and it's always some handsome fellow, and he's in Saudi Arabia or somewhere. He's far away, and he's divorced or he's widowed and just wants to be your friend. And no, thanks, and then you go down and there's no connecting. There's nothing connected to it. There you don't have any friends in common, and so just click them away. But some people, maybe, you're lonely and you think, well, look, he looks like a nice fellow. Could come to you, I would get there, but I need $800 to get a flight. And people do that all the time. And, not people with disabilities, just people who maybe are lonely or naive. Often it's just naivete or hoping to have a partner. Who knows, a million reasons, but there's always somebody out there that's ready to take advantage. It's our job to protect people and not protect them like, oh, be careful, don't do that, but explain to them in detail, whatever it takes, why it's a problem. And I love the things that how you break it down. You talk about things to how they can figure that out with finding out if the person's real or not real, or that should be part of, I mean, there should be something about this in regulations that every agency looks at. And some agencies are, I guess.
Training the internet safety training with people for years now, because it has been such a problem with either soliciting minors, that they didn't know,
Yeah.
because minors will do that too, where they'll say, I mean, you have to be a certain age to even be on Facebook, but we see kids on Facebook all the time. They don't pay attention to it. They get on too, but they'll start a conversation with someone and say they're 18 or however,
Sure.
and sure enough, they're 14. And then someone's in trouble for soliciting a minor. Nothing happens to the minor, but the adult gets in serious trouble. So
Exactly.
we have to be working with people on this stuff.
I spoke to a college class years ago, and one of the things I mentioned was the age of consent and how, whatever. And this student, male student, said, "Now, wait a minute. You're not telling me that if I'm out," and he was 20 or I don't know, 19, 18, whatever he was. if I'm out in a bar some night and some chick comes up to me and she's really cute and we want to hook up and she says she's 17 and we go and hook up, and then I find out later that she's 13, I can go to jail. And I said, yeah. And you'll be carrying around a label for a long time. He had no idea. He should. He was a college student, and but what are we doing as far as education with all across the board with all of this, including ourselves?
If you have to ask for the driver's license, ask for the driver's license.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
find a way to make it less obvious. Like, oh, I just got my picture of my driver's license. It's horrible. I don't even think it looks like me. Whip it out,
Yeah.
and then say, well, what's yours look like? You can always find a way to cleverly
Yeah.
get some information too. But I tell the folks that I support, when in doubt, stay out. So if there's any speculation that this person could be a minor, you stay away because it's jailbait. And I don't care if she's the finest looking thing you've ever laid eyes on
Yeah.
and she's professing her love for you. Get the hell out before you can't get out.
Exactly. Yeah, there was a situation again years ago where the young man went to jail. I mean, they were a couple, and then he turned 18 and she was 14 or whatever, 13, I don't remember the details. And he went to jail and was in jail for a couple of years, and got out and they got married. I mean, it was so bizarre because they actually had a relationship. And the age of consent in Pennsylvania is interesting. I don't know, you probably know all about that. And I think it's 16, the age of consent, but I think there's what do they call it? A Romeo and Juliet caveat.
Huh?
So it's 13 if they're both under 15. Is that right? So, I mean, oh my gosh, that's just crazy. But when you look at the history of the country and agrarian communities, that wasn't so unusual for young people, 13, 14, to get married.
I don't know when that law changed that you had to be a certain age before you no longer had to have a parent sign off on the agreement for you to get married. But I
Yeah,
mean, that was common.
yeah, it was. It was. There's so much to do. I really, and it is a blessing and a curse because we wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for the internet. And that's a gift that we have, that we're able to get together and do these podcasts and share information. And but the flip side of that is that if this particular show was about characters, cartoon character, there's not a far jump from this. It depends on how you get to where you're going, and do you know how to get there? Do you know where you're going? You don't, all of a sudden there you are in some pornographic site, and oh, this is interesting, I think I'm going to watch this, and off you go.
Like, what is your reason? I try to talk to people about the idea of taking breaks from social media. I try to purposely take breaks, lengthy breaks from social media, because we can really start to look at things and compare ourselves to other people, get really down, feel lonely, maybe even say things that we don't mean because we want that connection with people.
Yeah.
And that can create a lot of damage and problems for people too. But people also need to understand, we talked about the addiction. What happens if you follow the research to your brain if you spend so much time on electronics? There's research to show that it literally changes your brain as if you're on heroin.
Wow. Well, I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised. The younger, I mean, there are kids 5 years old or whatever age, young kids with their phones. And I don't know, I guess it's a easy way to get a babysitter, but it's not so good for the kid. I mean, it's an easy out for parents. And I don't mean they're doing it to harm their child. They just don't realize that they are harming their child.
Perfect example. You go to a restaurant now, I forget where I was, Chili's or I don't know. It feels like everyone has them now. They have the little computers on the table now where you can order things, you have to pay your bill, but there's a whole section where you can watch movies and play games on this pad. I don't even like to pay my bill because I just looked at the waitress and said, "Where's the crayons and
Oh my,
the placemat, the paper placemat?" Do you remember that? That didn't seem like too long ago.
right. Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
we would play tic-tac-toe with our parents or our kids while we were waiting for our food.
Yeah.
We work on the
Absolutely.
maze. Yeah.
Oh boy.
We're not doing that sort of thing anymore. So people are losing I think, problem solving skills. They're losing the skill of patience. I'm one of those people. You want to go to an amusement park. I'm not flying to get you the fast pass because you have a hard time waiting. I'm going to work with you on waiting because that is a critical skill in a relationship.
Yeah, oh boy, it sure is. So many things that we just let them, we don't address them. It's just easier not to, like it's almost like, if you're not part of the problem, you're part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And it's true. It's often easier just to let things go. It'll be fine. But it won't be fine. Somebody might get hurt. Somebody might hurt someone else. I mean, I do remember that a committee that I was on years ago, and Lance Couturier was the chief psychologist for the Department of Corrections. Wonderful, wonderful human being. And he was part of the group. And we had someone from the Bureau of Autism come and do a presentation to this group. And this was a cross systems group. And they were talking about describing autism. And when they finished, Lance said something like, "Oh my God, have we got these people in prison or what?" And it was really, this was 20 years ago. And, I think the department was then beginning to address why are these people here? If somebody had done something before, would they be here? If they had more education, more support, more whatever, would they be here? And I also think that Lance once said, if you look at someone who's gotten into trouble and don't say what's wrong with you, rather, how did we fail you? That's a different approach to take. And it is. So I don't want to be failing people. I want to do as much as we can to give them the information and the skills to not get in trouble and to have full, rich lives. And it's a real difficult one with the internet. There's no question about it. It really is. I mean, it's a way for them to experience life, but it can also be a way for them to get into big trouble.
So I just sit and I listen to you talk sometimes, and other things start to pop into my head. We've grown into this culture that needs such quick, instant gratification too. So we get an idea. We want something, a pair of shoes. We see a pair of shoes on someone and we know what they are. So we can get them immediately now. We don't even have to go to a store.
Or you'll be sitting at with a group of people. It could be a committee meeting. It could be a group of friends. It could be anything, small group. And somebody says, I was wondering, what if we did this, or what happened over here? And somebody pulls out their, instead of discussing it between the group and getting different perspectives, somebody pulls out their phone and Googles it. I mean, that's a piece of information. Thank you for that. But that's not necessarily the answer.
Losing our ability to problem solve. What I'm seeing is people can problem solve, but they're problem solving for bad, for ways to be sneaky or ways to get around things, to sort of instantly gratify them without really thinking through the potential consequences of things.
It's like getting too much change. Someone gives you pay for something, they give you too much change, and you realize it and you say, "Oh no, you gave me too much change." And the person behind you says, "What are you, crazy?" I mean, it's that, I mean, I'm saying that because that happened to me. And I just kind of looked at them and said, "Who are you that you would take the money?" And they said, "Of course I would." Well, whatever. But what happened to human decency and helping each other? And, that clerk would have to put the money in, I'm sure.
We're talking about the internet, but we have to work with people on different scenarios. We have to present. I have these little cards that I use, and it'll have a scenario that could come up through the internet or the cell phone. And we've just tried to think of all different scenarios that the person may face if they're on their cell phone or on the internet. And it's really an exercise in problem solving. So you get an email that says your bank account is frozen. What do you do? And we talked about that already, because we want to see how the person will problem solve that, and try to help them see different things related to that situation to perfect the problem solving. And again, when in doubt, ask someone for help.
Exactly. Just don't take, if you ask a question and you get an answer, why not say why? And we don't ask why. Well, you and I probably do, but I mean, a lot of people just don't. Someone in a position of authority tells them something, and that's it. that's, they believe it, and it might be true. I'm not saying that, that it wouldn't be. It often is true. But if someone says, why, explain that to me. That shouldn't come as someone being, insubordinate, sort of, it's, you explain why. We don't encourage people to ask why. We don't. We have to behave and stay in line and do the right thing and don't make waves. And no, it's not okay. Waves are good.
We want to teach people not to behave. And I'm not saying you have to be mean. I'm not saying you have to be disrespectful. It may come across as such,
Yeah.
but teach people. I ordered flowers for a friend of mine who retired, and they were supposed to get there last week. You know me, I'm pretty well thought out. If I'm going to do something, it's well thought out and planned in advance. Those flowers were to be there on a Wednesday. Well, Friday comes, the flowers aren't there. I'm calling every day. And then the response was, we couldn't find the address.
My goodness.
And I got so upset, but I was real calm. And I said, I could have picked those flowers and driven them there myself. Go find the address.
Yeah.
And sure enough, within an hour, the flowers were delivered.
Oh my goodness.
You got to speak up, or people are just going to railroad you.
And it's so much easier to railroad people who have been in some way dependent on others. It really is. Was talking to someone recently about within the family, a little one that says to her when her mother tells her to do something, she puts her little finger up and she says, "No, mama, no." And she's 3. And the mother was, saying, it's just so difficult. She's just getting so bold. And I said, but think about this. Think about her as an 18-year-old young woman, and someone says something to her, and she puts that same finger up and says, no. So even though it's hard to live with, it's a strength, but our folks, we don't encourage that. We don't, and some people can't. There's some people who are nonverbal or physically involved, and they can't. I mean, they, inside their souls they can, but maybe they can. But we just have got to give people the skills. We've got to help them to protect themselves and live fuller lives. And and when I say we, I mean it's the whole thing, the families and the staff and whatever. And we all are dragging around our own baggage and discomfort with sex and sexuality and lack of knowledge about the internet. So we're almost our worst enemy in trying to help other people. But we have you know all of it.
I've just had to research a lot too, because the dating sites, that is the one area dating is hard for people, all people. And
Yeah.
and we talked on one episode about we've done speed dating for people, so we've organized some of those events. But I've researched and really tried to take a look at what are some of the safest sites, and some that are specifically designed for people who are on the autism spectrum or who may have a physical or an intellectual disability. So there's a little more acceptance in safety, but nothing is 100% safe situation when you're talking about things on the internet. That's just the tricky part. And we as humans, we're so desperate and so lonely for affection and love and a sense of belonging. So a
Absolutely.
big element too is just a person's self-esteem and getting them to see the value of themselves and being okay with who they are
Yeah.
without overwhelming desire to think that I need this other person in order to be enough as a human.
That's always kind of sad for me. The people think they're not complete unless they have a partner. And of course it's lovely to have a partner, and of course it is to help somebody understand you're okay. You're okay. You as a human being are a valuable, important thing. And not all of us have partners. I mean, I had a wonderful one and he's gone, and I remember that and I'll have it forever, but that's not going to happen for me again. And so be it. And there's so many ways to get, to feel like you're part of you can be part of a group. There are many groups out there, but we need to support people and encourage them and get them to those groups. The LGBT community, I mean, within the world of disabilities and autism, there are support groups all over the place for LGBT people, all kinds of groups. And just find them, Google them, and go there, go with the person that you're supporting. And ran one of those groups for 10 years, they exist all over the place. And it was wonderful when we had people come from group homes or whatever, and because everybody was so supportive and you could be who you were there. Yeah, there's no reason why that can't happen except for the discomfort of other people, us.
We have to create the opportunities. And when I write risk screenings, I'm often writing about how we can't wait for people to just say, hey, I want to go meet a friend and make a friend. We have to start thinking outside of the box to create those opportunities. And you don't look at the disability, you look at, what does this person love? What is their personality like? If there's someone who likes crocheting, I'm not going to try to find somebody with a disability who likes crocheting. I'm going to try to help find people who like crocheting to connect that person with.
Oh, there's so much to be looked at and addressed.
We talk a lot about things. We try to give some resources and information. I talk about the app. I use an application called Qstodio, Qustodio, Qstodio. And you can put that on the computer, or you can put that on an Android or an iPhone, and you can block pornography, you can block gambling, you can block different categories. And they're all things, all kinds of things that you can do with this. I love it because, again, if we're seeing that people are going down a path that means they could end up in jail or lose $3,000 because they're so desperate to find love, we absolutely need to consider it. And I'll hear, well, it's their right to do that. Well, of course it is, but aren't we required to provide some mechanism of safety for people too? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have a person right now, he's back involved with the legal system, and he is sending pornographic material to unwilling participants. He's going to get in big trouble. And yesterday I said, look, this is how you present it, because he used to have a phone plan. He used to follow the phone plan. Now he just doesn't care. And he's really a ticking time bomb for going away for a long time. It's either this Qstodio is an option and you can still use your phone. You still have, keep it on you. No one takes it. Or I'm writing a restricted procedure and I'm taking the phone, because you going to jail, most likely federal prison, considering everything that's happened, that's not an option for me. You having no phone is far less restrictive than you sitting in prison for the next 9 years.
And it's interesting because when I did the safer options issue, it was really Lance Couturier that I mentioned. He was with the Department of Corrections. It's this whole backwards thing again. I wonder what the Department of Corrections is doing in the prison system to identify and support people who are on the spectrum or have intellectual disabilities. I mean, what are they doing? What's happening there? But the other side of that is, we don't need any more in there. Thank you very much. So how can we keep them out? And the more we can educate and reach out and support and, break through some of these boundaries and put down our damn phones and, all of that, it's going to spare people having these horrible lives in prison. It's just ripped away from their families and their friends, and not even understanding why. Just can't continue doing that. We just can't.
Join us the next time on Two Old Sexperts. Sharon and I will be talking about different sex acts. We're going to examine and teach you about the Cookie Sutra and how we can use this to support people in understanding more in a very non-threatening way about different sex acts. The book is by Edward J. and talks about where imaginations are fertile, love will never grow stale nor crumble.
Ooh.